from God's Unchanging Word Studios in New Orleans, we are pleased to bring you news, nuggets, and insights with today's host, Tom Carey.
Well, greetings, everyone, and welcome to God's Unchanging Word and another edition for our news, nuggets, and insights. And today is Friday, January 11th, 2019. Rushing through the year already. And boy, do we have a lot to tell you today. We're going to talk about abortion, the abortion apocalypse. It's absolutely phenomenal when you realize what's actually taking place around not just the United States, but around the world. Then we're going to talk about the U.S. debt, and this is part of a continuing series that we began last week. We're going to carry on through for the next couple of weeks, talking about the U.S. debt and the government shutdown. And then finally, we got an exciting part of our program for the biblical connection to the Battle of New Orleans, Part 2. And wait till you see what's coming up in that section. You're going to really like it. So now, you ready? Let's get this thing started. But before we do, I got to tell you, the first two news shorts, I'm laughing, but it isn't really funny, but I'm just trying to find a way to bring this to you because the first two things are really bizarre. One's sickening and one just plain old strange. The very first thing is this. This was come out from The Blaze. Brave New World, a gay man impregnates transgender partner who identifies as a male. All right, so I'm going to stop here before I actually bring up any pictures. They're not gory pictures, but they're real pictures. So I want to warn you, this is pretty disgusting, is when you think about what the world's doing. Here we actually have a transgender now who is pregnant, a man. So the old adage is a man can't deliver a baby. Well, that still holds true, except in the bizarre world of which we, as people on this planet, have created. All right, so here's another picture of this is actually a woman who partially transgendered into a man, marries a man, and now they're having a baby. Now, when you get a chance, freeze the frame and try to go figure that one out. And even more strange, what about the poor child that's going to be born into a family like this? How in the world do you explain all of this? Well, anyway, that's the world that we're creating, and that's why God says He's coming back to stop all of this. Well, anyway, there's a lot more to tell you about that, but I actually didn't want to go any further to that just to make you aware of the bizarreness that's actually taking place out in the world. How about this one? This is the post-apocalyptic time story. Remember the movie Soylent Green? Well, if you didn't see the movie, let me tell you, is that there's food substance that everybody was surviving on after the apocalypse had taken place. It was called Soylent Green, which was humans. So they were actually decomposing humans and eating them, and that's what the survival was for the mankind. That's the end of the story, and that's how it ends. Well, now it comes into real life. The state of Washington is set to legalize human composting, the green afterlife that is good for the planet. This is from The Independent. Human composting, here's a nice little picture that they put out of a burial ground of talking about human composting. And it starts off with from ashes to ashes, now is from dust to new trees. That's the way it's being portrayed. The state of Washington is poised to make history by legalizing a way of dealing with the dead in a way that is good for the planet and potentially the soul. So what can I say? What can you imagine anything? The bottom line is here is life is becoming so meaningless to almost anyone on this planet, it seems like. But the state of Washington is literally trying to pass a law to make this legal. And what you're looking at is like a rest area. You go and visit is where they take the bodies and have them decomposing until they're just back into dust, and you go out and plant them. Just the whole concept is just I don't know what to say. You draw your own conclusion. But anyway, what I wanted to do is bring you just a couple of the stories because we come across so many of them as we're going through the news and trying to see what we want to talk about today. But some of the things that seem to be such way out there that's actually leading the way the world is going, we try to grab those and share that with you so that we're not taken unaware. All right, so now let's get to the focus of the week. This is a serious issue now. This is something that is kind of sad, well, not kind of, but very sad when you begin to think about it. We're going to talk about the abortion apocalypse. The assault continues on babies. And in that section, we're going to talk about the evangelicals supporting abortion. Now, the churches now are rallying around abortion. And we're going to talk about Iowa changing the laws that are under fire now for the abortion, and global abortion, which is unprecedented. I don't know if you've taken a look at the scale and the scope of abortion around the world, but you're going to be shocked when you see this. So let's begin with this, the abortion apocalypse. Evangelicals jump on the LGBT bandwagon. This is from the Christian Post and from Life News in the apocalypse now. 66 Methodist, Lutheran, Episcopalian, and the United Church of Christ leaders signed a letter supporting abortion. Iowa group of clergy and religious leaders signed the letter to the Des Moines Register last week advocating the abortion on demand. I mean, that means that anybody at any given time, if they just want abortion, there's no reason for it. It doesn't matter what time period in the term it is. They just go get an abortion. It doesn't matter. All right, so let me back that up. The letter blasts the Iowa lawmakers from trying to pass a bill prohibiting abortions from the moment an unborn baby's heartbeat is detectable at about 6 weeks of pregnancy. That's actually a little late. They actually can predict and test for a heartbeat now as early as 18 days. As early as 18 days, they can actually find a heartbeat. So Iowa is trying to pass a law. Once it has a heartbeat, you can't have the abortion. So everybody is in an uproar about that, and now they're getting the religious community to do the same thing. So let me stop for just a second. When you look in the Bible, God's talking about Jeremiah in the book of Jeremiah, and he begins with warning. Now, Jeremiah has a duality in purpose. It's for the timing of the end time, especially for God's elect. So when Jeremiah, where God says you send them to Israel, to Judah, and to the uttermost parts of the world, that's an end time promise and prophecy, what God says. And Jeremiah begins with, woe to you pastors. All right, so I wanted to mention that to you. So if you go into the Bible, this is one of the things that God hates. Talking about the religious leaders who are supposed to have the authority of God, talking about this and saying it's okay to do this. All right, so let me get back to the article. So it's not the role of the government to infringe. This is from the religious leaders. It's not the role of the government to infringe upon a woman's right to make private medical decisions, religious leaders from various denominations and faiths wrote. So this is the 66 supporters. I just pulled a few of them up here about the abortion just to give you an idea how mainstream this is. You have the United Methodist, Evangelical Lutheran Church of America, the Episcopal Presbyterian Church of the USA, United Church of Christ, American Baptist, Reformed Judaism, leaders from the Unitarian Universalism, Christian Church, which is the Disciples of Christ, and it just goes on, urging the lawmakers to keep abortion legal for unborn babies whose heartbeats are beating. So now this is some more of what they actually wrote. Now watch this twist of how they're using religion and turning it around. The constitutional right of women to make their own health care decision is being attacked in the Iowa legislature with arguments based only in religious beliefs. It will create harm to Iowa women and a woman's right to make her own medical decisions. It's creating a clear path for the government to intrude in the most personal rights and decisions of Iowa women. This is unconstitutional and it's wrong. It's wrong to prevent people from killing babies, is what they're saying. It goes on. Calling, you ready? The pro-life legislation immoral. Absolutely bizarre. It sounds like just the same language that they're using about the wall. The wall protecting the country that God says he set a protection, a hedge around Israel, and they're calling that immoral if you have a wall of protection. Now, because they're trying to have to pass a law to protect the babies, they're calling that immoral. I mean, these kind of things you just can't make up. When you hear them and you read them, it's like, what are they thinking? All right, so let me go on. Calling the pro-life legislation immoral, they argue that women deserve to make their own decisions about their bodies and their pregnancies. They said this, every person has the right to their own personal and religious beliefs and to live their life how they determine is best for them. Now you're in the time where the Bible says everyone does right in their own eyes. In other words, there is no more standard. There is no more immoral or moral standards based upon the Scripture because they have thrown God out. Now keep that in mind because we're going to come to a little section saying, well, how come God doesn't help all the children in this country? Remember, we're coming back here because we're taking God and we're throwing him out and telling him, leave us alone. We will do our own thing. All right, that's where we're at. That's what we're talking about here. So the government does not have the right to infringe on the freedoms or privacy of either woman based on the religious beliefs that they wrote. So there you have it. That's the religious community stepping up to protect abortion. As Jeremiah, as I told you earlier, Jeremiah says, woe to you pastors, and you will pay a price for what you're talking about. So now, the abortion apocalypse, more deaths by abortion than all other wars put together. I got a picture I'm going to show you that was sent to me, a gentleman out of Canada, and this really shows you what we're talking about here. Look at all the deaths. See that large red circle? Just keep that up on the screen right now. Roe versus Wade. That's the large red scale that you're looking at there. All the other wars put together, from Civil War all the way through to Afghanistan, are all in that little piece, that little sliver. Some are so minute that you'd have to zoom this out to who knows what size to be able to even see the piece of the pie. But that's the deaths, wars versus abortion in America alone. That's amazing. I mean, I saw that and it's like, wow, look at this. There's no way to understand the depth of what's going on here in America. So that's just the tip of the iceberg, all right? So we generally think of abortions in the U.S. and not worldwide. But look at this headline that I came across talking about abortion. Almost 42 million abortions were performed in 2018. That's 1 year. 42 million worldwide. These are documented. More deaths than cancer, AIDS, and traffic combined. That's worldwide. Now look at this. Now this is since 1973, Roe versus Wade. All right. They estimate that over 60 million, or almost 61 million babies killed. But look at the same from worldwide from 1980. This is just about 7 years later. 1.5 billion babies been aborted since 1980 worldwide. I read that and then I went into these pieces and started studying down that line, and it's like I just could not believe what I was reading. And literally these are documented as far as they can, as closely as they can put their facts together, because they can't document every single one, and they're not too far off. So let's say, well, they're only 500 million off. That's still 1 billion babies that's been aborted worldwide. That's just unbelievable. And that's why I call this section the abortion apocalypse. That's how many babies were killed. So now let's go on. How does that translate now into our children? And that we're talking and bringing our children up. So what do they think about this as we're going through this? This is from a website, and we've used this website before as they were introducing children to transgenders or to drag queens, and how wonderful and warm it is. And you know, this little section, I copied the video of it. I couldn't even bring it into our program. But it's out there. As this woman now, they bring these children in. Let me give you the setup with these children. They don't know what they're going to be talking about. All right, when they bring them into the set, they say, what are we going to talk about? Well, on this one here, they're talking about abortion, talking about expanding abortion for the children's approval. All right, there's a website out now, and it's called Shout Your Abortion. You know, it's a website that promotes abortions. This is the headlines if you go to the website. It says, abortion is normal. Our stories are ours to tell. This is not a debate. So what they have done here in that picture that you just seen is they bring these children in. The parents, by the way, are doing this. They bring these kids in from as little as look like 6, 7 years old to young teens, and then they sit down and start talking to them about a subject. And in this one here, it's abortion. asking them what they think. And then they began to tell them why abortion is good. If the children don't agree with it, it's almost as if like they've been intimidated to accept what's being taught to them then, even if they didn't agree with it at the time. It's absolutely horrific what they're doing to the children. But this is what's going on. You can actually go on and find it. It's online. It's about a 7-minute video. And they're talking about this as a natural process of life that's designed by God. That's what they're telling these kids. And so they're learning from their littlest of infancy. So let me ask you a question. The children who grow up in the Middle East and they want to blow up buses and kill women and children, do they think it's right or wrong? Well, they think it's right. Why? Because that's what they've been taught since they were little, that they're doing good for God. So now we have the religious leaders, we have the government system, and we have parents now taking our littlest of children and saying, it's good. It's part of God's plan for nature to be able to have abortions and kill these babies. And they said it's not killing babies. Like one child says, it's more like a sea cucumber because it can't put together thought process yet. So since it can't put together thought process, it's not a human being. It's resemblance to, I don't know if you've ever been in a sea and know what a sea cucumber is, but I've brought them out. It's a little thing that's kind of spongy. It's alive, and you take it out of the water, it's all gooey, and it just dies almost immediately. Well, it's like a sea cucumber, they're saying. Or like somebody's arm, and has no life and no meaning. That's what they're teaching the children from their earliest stages. Absolutely bizarre. Going on. Now, how about this one, right? Now, if you want an abortion, now it's available through mail order. Mail order abortion pill. There you have it, mail order abortion pill. How about this one? This is, by the way, tax dollars, U.S. tax dollars that goes to Planned Parenthood. In that same state of Iowa where the evangelicals are protesting, Planned Parenthood launched a billboard promoting abortion. And so everyone's proud of it now. Here we go. I had an abortion and I'm not apologizing. How about this one? I had an abortion. It was just health care. Like you're going in for a checkup. I'm going to go in and take tonsils out when they're sick. Well, we just go in and take out that life and no difference. And so you get to the stage where they want to bury people. That's why I brought that article in about burying people and becoming a tree, human waste and composting. Why not? We have no respect for life from its beginning. Why would they have any respect for its death? All right, let's go on. Part of the nuggets here, and I've been giving them to you as we went through this part. This was a little slide I had up just a few minutes ago talking about pro-life calling it immoral not to allow people to have abortions. Here's what Isaiah says, Isaiah 5:20. Woe to those who call evil good and good evil, who put darkness for light and light for darkness, who put bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter. I don't know about you, but that's a pretty bitter pill to swallow. We were putting this together, and Audrey and I, and it was like the rest of our day was pretty down. You have to get away from this and go to God and ask God to pick up your emotion and your spirit, because when you look at what's coming down, and one of the things about this program is like you hate to bring this stuff out, but God says you have to. God says, cry aloud and spare not. Warn the people for their sins. God says they're not going to listen, but you tell them anyway. So that's what we're doing. And I'm going to tell you, when you talk about Jeremiah, they called him the weeping prophet. Well, Jeremiah, from his infancy, his job was to do this. And so his whole life, what he had to go through, when he seen what was going on and what was going to happen to his country that he loved, they called him the weeping prophet. And you can look at in Lamentations how he felt about that. Well, that's where we are. And what we need to get in our heads and what's coming down is that it's not good for this world. It's not good for the United States. And at some point in time, it may not be today or tomorrow, but at some point, and I don't think too far in the distant future, God's going to bring this to an end. Because when this generation passes and the next generation comes up that has no respect of God, then there's nothing there to save. So God says before that happens, he says, before that generation passes, when it was possible to destroy mankind from the face of the earth, he said he will return. I believe that's somewhere in the lifespan of most of the people watching this program today. All right, so now let's go on with this. There's one more segment I want to bring out in this part with the children, and this is a carryover from last week. We're talking about abusing children. Children now abusing children, which is becoming epidemic, and it's growing every single year. All right, children abusing children. Now, last week we talked about taking our children and just turning them over to whoever to get married, which is a law in many parts in the Middle East, and they're trying to even bring it here into America. So what happens when children now begin to pick up on that same lifestyle, where it's okay for whatever you want to do with children, and especially when you take them to the realm of pornography and abuse of children? Says children abusing children, this was a headline, the sexual revolution and its latest victims. Ever since the days of Hugh Hefner, the sexual revolution's most effective champion, we've been told that porn is a harmless form of entertainment for sophisticated people. Wrong. I put that in. Study after study. Let me back that up because I didn't read the little box next to it. Look at here. 20%, all right, children who sexual abuse, 20% are abused before they're at the age of 8 years old. That generally means that they're in the hands of somebody whose family or friends who knows them. 20%, that means 1 out of every 5 is abused. All right, going on. All right, so I'm going to read the box here. 90% of child sexual abuse know their abusers. What I just talked about just a second ago. 90% of them know who their abusers are. Study after study shows that the destructive impact of pornography, yes, on adults and on the victims expected to play along with the porn-inspired fantasies. Also on the children, some are very young, who are exposed to it, are acting out what they see and are forcing other children to participate. So what this is telling us is that if children are brought into the pornography and actual sexual fantasies with an adult, the children now are doing the same thing to other smaller children in their realm. Now, last box, 1 out of 10 will be sexually abused before they're 18 years old. 1 out of every 10 before they're 18 years old. These are horrible statistics. This isn't in the U.S. alone. So going on with this little segment. This was the headline that I was reading. It says, we have an epidemic. Almost half of the perpetrators are minors between the ages of 11 and 15. What are they talking about here? We're talking about children who are perpetrating on other children the sexual fantasies and the abuse on other children, beating and assault. Children assaulting children. Reporters at the Kansas City television station KSHB recently interviewed doctors and nurses at Children's Mercy Hospital. This is a hospital that sees 1,000 children each year who have been sexually assaulted. That's one hospital. Heidi Olson, a nurse there who treats these victims, said she was shocked at what the data has told them. Almost half of our perpetrators are minors between ages of 11 and 15. So here's what's happening. Grown-ups are abusing the children. As the older children get older, they begin abusing other children. This is a cycle that's going on and on and on. And every single year, the statistics of what's taking place, it gets deeper and deeper and deeper. So if you go back and you look at the history of how this is going on, you'll find that the percentage is growing every single year. It will not stop. Why? Because we're legalizing a lot of it. We're saying it's okay, it's understandable, it's something that just happens. And so what we're looking at in the younger groups, instead of 1 in 10, the younger people now is getting to be 2 in 10 and then 3 in 10. Until God steps in and stops all of this, the chance for our children to ever come to the truth, to repentance, and to know a healthy, happy way of life is continuing to diminish year after year after year. And we need to say something about that. And our people and God's people across this planet needs to step up and talk about how wrong this is. And Jesus Christ says, pray that thy kingdom come. Because that's what it's going to take to be able to stop all this. To give the children a chance to understand what a happy, healthy, wholesome life will be. A home where you have a mother and a father and children, where they can go out and play in the street and not have to be worried about being taken away, abused and abducted, or taken off and being killed. Those way of life is gradually, slowly, step by step, increasing across the globe and even here in America. We're going to keep talking about these subjects as we go on, because they've got to be spoken up against to give our children in the future of where we're going. The last scripture I want to bring out in this section is this. Hosea 6:4 says this. My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge, because you have rejected knowledge. I will also reject you, that you shall be no priest to me, seeing that you have forgotten the law of God. I will also forget your children. I told you just a little bit earlier in the program, when we got to this stage, why I was telling you the story about, well, why doesn't God help the children? Remember when we went here? This is because we have kicked God out. Because you don't want God in the picture, He's not there when you need Him. He's not there. All right, let's get to the second focus. A little less sobering, but just as much as concerning. This is the last program. All right, we're talking about the U.S. debt, the government shutdown. This is actually part 2. The economy is growing. We look across the board. Those are true pictures. The economy is growing, but the debt is still outpacing the growth. Then we're going to talk about debt projection to the year 2023. This is going to blow you away, what we're going to show you today. All right, so now let's talk about the economy and the government shutdown. Let's see what we have here. All right, so now the partial government shutdown. They're going to get this straightened out. Who knows how and when, but eventually they will. And the people on the back, and who's not getting the checks, eventually they'll get their checks. That's not the issue here. The issue here is what's right and what's wrong here. Is what we're talking about today in this U.S. debt. Now this is the debt clock. I showed you last week the debt clock. I'm going to pick it up where we had talked about last week, and then we're going to go on from here. What I showed you last week, where I put that little box around it, was showing you the interest alone that we're paying on the debt every year. That interest amounted to $3 trillion. In 1 year, we're paying $3 trillion in interest alone. So you think about the wall. They want $5.6 or $8 billion, and you got $3 trillion in just debt. On the U.S. debt clock, that boils down to this. Every day, $8.4 billion of debt every single day. Every hour, $353 million. That's 1 hour of debt that they're paying. And $5.8 million every minute. Every minute, $5.8 million. So in a 1 hour program, if I could just have the interest alone that the government could save, they would be giving you $353 million just to save the interest for 1 hour. You can't think, there's no way to think in these terms of what we're up against. And it don't get better, it gets worse, all right? So now let's take that and let's take a see what we're looking at. Now, here what I have is, if you go to the debt clock, I just want to show you this because this is an area I'm going to get into next week. This is talking about the positive side of things. But even in the positive side of things, it's negative. So let me show you this. This was the workforce last year. And I don't have, when I blew it up, it got real fuzzy. But it's 154 million people in the workforce. And today there's 157 million in the workforce. So that means in 1 year, they put together 3 million people back into the workforce. That's pretty good news by anybody's standards. So that's 3 million more people paying taxes this year than was paying last year. All right, so that would seem to be pretty good, and it is. However, the debt is overpowering even this. So I just want to show that to you. I'm going to come back into showing you the positive side and show you how even the positive side is not good. We'll talk about that next week. So now, this is a projection of the U.S. debt clock by the government itself in 2023. All right, this is actually a snapshot that I took from the U.S. debt clock projected out to 2023. So now look at the debt of the interest. Remember what we just had a few minutes ago? $3 million? All right, that was the debt in 2018. Look at 2023. $4 trillion in interest. In 4 years, we will pick up an additional $1 trillion a year of interest. Just interest, all right? That's what you're looking at there. All right, so now let's go into talking about the debt clock here. We're back again. This is last year. All right, $111 trillion. Now, you're looking at that box on the bottom. All right, so now, this bottom here is called U.S. unfunded liabilities gap. What does gap mean? That means is that the federal budget, the Social Security, and Medicare liability, all of those going into this that they have to pay for, they know at some point they got to pay for it every year, has grown is $111 trillion. We can't pay the debt we have. But this is the unfunded liabilities. This means this is debt that we have taken on and we have agreed to pay for at some point in time. It's like getting a loan, and then in your loan you have a balloon note. You pay a note that you can afford to pay every month. But at some point in time, at the balloon note, at the end where you got, let's say, $1,000 a week, the balloon note comes in and say, on this week now you got to pay, $200,000 on $1,000, but there's no way to pay it. Well, that's what we're facing here. So now I want to focus now on this box. All right, so let's focus on that box. So what we're looking at in 2018 now is the unfunded liabilities that we have agreed to pay in the gap of $111.6 trillion. $111.6 trillion. So now let's pull it up again. I'm going to pull it over here on the side because now we're going to do a comparison. All right, let's do a comparison. So now what I'm bringing up a current U.S. chart. This is 2019. So now 2019, I circled the box, and how much do we have? In 1 year. 1 year. All right, in 1 year, not only has the debt gone up to $21 trillion from what it was, the unfunded liabilities have jumped. You ready? $10.3 trillion in 1 year. All the debt that has been being made and continuing, that we passed the law, we're going to spend this, we're okay, we're going to go out there and give to everybody, it's all being pushed down. You remember, you hear the phrase, kick the can? They're kicking the can? Well, they're kicking the can, all right. But as more cans get kicked, they become due at some point. You have to sell the bonds. You have to sell securities. You have to sell treasuries. The rest of the world is looking at this. So the rest of the world is saying, we don't like the way you're playing with us now. We don't like the way you're giving these trade embargoes and these tariffs. We've been buying your debt. So now they're backing away from the debt. And Europe is forming alliances with Japan and now South America. And China is forming alliances with the Eastern blocs. And Russia's forming alliances with the Middle East. And the United States is being more and more isolated out there as this continues to grow. And here in America, we're saying, wow, this is the best time we've had in modern times. We're making all this money. We put 3 million people to work. The reality is going to come really soon. That's what the rest of the world is looking at. And so we're seeing all that taking place. Now, it gets worse. Now, let's go to the projection. All right, this is 2023. Look at the bottom box now. 2023. This is what they project the unfunded liability gap to be in just 4 years. $157 trillion, not billion, trillion dollars. $157 trillion. How much is that? Well, let's see. All right, oops, I thought I had another one on there. Maybe I don't. There it is. It's an additional $35 trillion. $35 trillion in 4 more years. So we have gone from 111 trillion to 121, and in 4 years they estimate it'll be at $157 trillion. Do you think that's going to ever stop? Do you think the rest of the world can't add? At some point in time, it's beyond anybody's recognition. Everybody in Congress knows this. And everyone who tells you we're going to be okay is lying to you. There's only one place that's not lying to you. It's God's holy word. And God's holy word who says, because you have rejected me, I will reject you. That day is coming. And what we're looking at in the middle of all the euphoria, and I've warned people this past year, don't get caught up in the euphoria. Use this time is the way to give yourself time to pay out bills, to secure yourself, pay off your home, begin to prepare for when a collapse comes. And it may not be tomorrow, but like with Jeremiah, he was preaching for 40 years before it came. God's given people and his people time to prepare for what's coming. But those are figures that I'm not making them up. This isn't some pundit on TV telling you pro or con. This is from the government itself. These are facts and figures that don't lie. They're out there for you and I. So now, interest on the debt 2019, $3 trillion. Interest on the debt 2023, $4 trillion. We'll talk more about that next time as we get into it. So the U.S. debt clock, this will be I think my final slide that I want to bring out. I want to show you something. This is a comparison, but everybody telling you how great we're doing because of the business and the taxes. Let me show you what's coming up. All right, so here's our U.S. debt in 2019 and 2023. So now follow my little box. All right, there's my box on the left. That's the U.S. national debt as it stands right now. All right, that's the U.S. national debt. So now look at the tax revenue that's coming in. We're taking in $3.328 trillion against the almost $22 trillion debt. Look at the projection now for 4 years from now. The expected national debt to be $25.6 trillion. But look at the revenue, $3.5 trillion. So what's happened? All right, so in 4 years, the national debt is going to grow $3.75 trillion. This figure here, that's year by year. That's actual operating every year. That's not all the debt. That's just what it costs to operate every single year and how far behind we are. So now, in 1 year, in 4 years, we went $3.75 trillion up in projection, but we're only going to increase in taxes $213 billion. So you see what's going on? Even with the addition of 3 million people in the workplace, we pick up $213 billion. But the debt went up $3.75 trillion. So you see, we're on a projection that there's no way to make this work. It's only getting worse and worse and worse. And so you begin to see what's taking place. So now let's look at last year to this year. All right, this is 2018, as you see on the right-hand corner of the box, 2018. There's the national debt of $20.6 trillion, and there's the revenue from last year. We actually took in more revenue last year than this year. We took in $50 billion less this year than last year in revenue. That's facts and figures. You're not making them up. So eventually, with the more people working, you are going to pick up more taxes, but you can't pick up anywhere near what you need. So now let's take a point of the Democrats saying, well, we're going to tax the rich and make this work. Well, if you took all the rich together, put them all together, took everything they own, you can't cover the differences. If you took 100% of everything they got, and then you have no more to go get. So you see what I mean? There's no way to make this thing work. So I want to bring that out. Now, we're going to bring out more of these boxes that's going to shock you next week. And then I want to get to where we come to the 20th, because each year we do it right at 12 o'clock, the 20th, when the president takes office, and I'll bring an update for that. All right, so now when we come back, let's take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about part 2 of the Battle of New Orleans. We have a little video, gives you a little history of the Battle of New Orleans and the War of 1812, and I'll be right back.
The War of 1812 is a story as much about a nation in conflict with itself as it is a clash of countries. Early 19th century America is a loose association of scattered states, bordered by a vast wilderness to the west and miles of ocean to its east. Isolated communities are surrounded by uncharted and hostile territory. Americans are intertwined by one thread: shipping. On January 7th, 1815, after weeks of holding off the British invaders, Andrew Jackson's ragtag army of 4,000 men lie in wait. At any moment, the inevitable attack will begin. The Battle of New Orleans will be the climactic showdown of the War of 1812.
As the evening of January 7th appears, the men behind Line Jackson know that an attack is imminent. They can hear the sounds directly in front of them, and yet their morale is extremely high because in their mind, they have beaten the British twice. And they feel themselves almost invincible, each man relying upon that piece of wall that he himself has constructed. And it is their morale, coupled with good luck, which will turn the tide of the battle.
Just outside the city, thousands of reinforcements led by General Pakenham intend to overwhelm the Americans with sheer numbers and take advantage of a glaring weakness in their defense.
Pakenham's plan is aggressive, but it's too complicated. He's got too many columns moving forward, and everything has got to be timed to perfection.
In the pre-dawn mist of January 8, 1815, the British begin their advance. From the start, problems plague Pakenham's troops. The muddy riverbanks slow the launching of the attack force. Once in the water, the swift current sends some boats too far downstream before they can reach the west bank. By the time they make it across the river, it will be too late to effect the battle. Elsewhere, the 44th Regiment, part of the main assault force, blunders.
The primary assault column is on the march, and the regiment that's supposed to carry the scaling ladders have forgotten them. They've left them behind. When they go back to get them, the column's already on the move.
At sunrise, the mist clears, exposing the oncoming British force, rocket fire lighting their way.
Press your lines.
Jackson calls to his men.
They are near enough now, gentlemen. You may fire when ready.
A Kentucky rifleman remembers how his fellow defenders responded to Old Hickory's orders.
Steady, boys. Hold your fire. Take aim! Fire!
Then the heavy iron cannon, and some thousands of small arms joined in and made the ground shake under our feet. As soon as the firing began, Captain Patterson came running along. He shouted, "Shoot low, boys! Shoot low! Break 'em!"
The British Army has lost its commander.
In just 20 minutes, the British High Command has been obliterated. The survivors realize they will never reach New Orleans and halt the attack. Improbably, Old Hickory's ragtag army has just trounced the world's best fighting force in little more than 2 hours.
It was the one moment that we needed psychologically to prove that we had a right to exist as an independent and free nation. And we did it at that time. After the War of 1812, we proved we were here to stay. And that's why I think it should be remembered by all Americans today.
History remembers the War of 1812 as the Forgotten War. It is a story of courage, endurance, and a little bit of luck. Forged by fire, united by will, a young nation defied the odds and won.
Welcome back. And that's just the beginning of the story. So I'm going to tell you the part of the story, like Paul Harvey, this is going to be the rest of the story, that you haven't heard before. So we're going to tie in our Nuggets portion to the biblical connection to the Battle of New Orleans in the War of 1812. Louisiana Purchase and the Battle of New Orleans. There's two events that go unnoticed by history that brought all of this about, and both involve Spain. First, the Spanish colony in Louisiana was the faltering due to the counterfeit, worthless money that they presented. And second was a Spanish shipwreck. So we're going to talk about that, bringing all that in today. But first, let's talk about the miracle. Have you ever heard about the miracle of the Battle of New Orleans? There's actually a book. Brian Kilmeade from the Fox News Network, it's got a bestseller. He calls it Andrew Jackson and the Miracle of New Orleans. So he's focusing on Andrew Jackson and the actual war itself and the miracle and all the events that took place that gave us a victory. And by the way, it was when you look at it. But there's another miracle that's built inside. If you talk about this before the book, it's talking about a Catholic church and their nuns. So let me ask you something. If you were Satan and you knew God's plan, how would you deceive man? Well, one of the biggest things he does is he creates a counterfeit. And so here in the miracle of the Battle of New Orleans, the miracle that God was creating through the promises that was given to Abraham and to Isaac and to Jacob, that's carried all the way through to the end time, is gone underground and is not even noticed of what's taking place today. Why? Because they're talking about the miracle of what was taking place that I'm going to talk to you about right now. It says, right before the battle began at midnight, all night long, the Ursuline sisters, there was a church, and the Ursuline nuns was in New Orleans, and the citizens prayed in the chapel of Our Lady of Consolation and waited the word from the Chalmette battlefield. So they all came together in prayer and fasted for the people who were fighting in the war. And what they did is they took this picture that you're seeing here, and they put it over the chapel for Mary, and they prayed to it to protect the people. All right, so let me back that up again. So what happens is, in the morning time, the consolation word came that they had victory while they were still in the chapel praying. So the world knows that if you come to New Orleans and you take the tour through the history, they will bring you through the Ursuline Academy that still exists today. And they will tell you the reason New Orleans won is because of the nuns who were praying to Mary that brought about the victory. And they call that the miracle of New Orleans, that God answered these women who were praying to Mary. But I'm going to tell you the real story. We went into this last week. We were talking about Israel and how it went into captivity in 3 different ways and how they came out after God showed the 2,520 years. If you haven't seen that program for this one to make sense, go to our archives, go online, go to God's Unchanging Word, News Nuggets and Insights, find the archives for News Nuggets and Insights, and you can watch this program, and we tell you how we get to this slide. But I'm going to pick it up from here. So here was the 3 stages that Israel had gone into captivity and came out 2,520 years later. The first was the beginning of the removal in 745 BC. Second phase was the beginning of the loss of their own governance. And the third was the beginning of the loss of their identity. So what God does 2,520 years, precisely the same, comes back with what they lost, God gives back. 2,520 years later was the beginning of the restoring of the wealth and the resources as America began to take its possession of its own land. Second was the beginning of the restoration of self-governance with our Constitution in 1789. That is 2,520 years, as we brought out last year. And finally is the beginning of the fulfillment of the destiny of America, which is the identity of who we are, our 50 states, showing an end-time promise of freedom, showing the Jubilee, that America actually stands for the land of the free. 50 states is Jubilee. So now let's take that Louisiana Purchase and watch how this plays in. The Louisiana Purchase was in 1803, was a land deal between the United States and France in which the United States acquired approximately 827,000 square miles of land west of the Mississippi River for $15 million. Now in that picture you can see, and you probably already know, but that's the picture of the Louisiana Purchase that America was able to get from France. They bought in 1803. How did that come about? All right, so here we have the French had lost. This is building up and leading to it in the wreck and how it all came to be. The French had lost the 7 Years' War to the British. This is back in the late 1700s, between 1755 to 1762, and foresaw the upcoming repercussion. King Carlos II of Spain, who was cousin to King Louis XV of France, Through the Bourbon bloodline, in 1762, Louis ceded the territory to Carlos with the Treaty of Fontainebleau to protect New Orleans from the British. Basically what this is saying is that they knew they lost the war. Right? So the French knew that they had lost the war. So he takes New Orleans, which he knew was a vital part of America, and before the treaty signed, he turns that New Orleans over to the Spanish to protect the land, so it can't be given back to the French. Right? So that's what that's telling you. So the next year, Britain and France signed the Treaty of Paris that ended the war officially and gave all the English the Mississippi except for New Orleans. So all the land except for New Orleans was given back to the British, right? At the end of that war. All right, so here we have in New Orleans is the little sign. I don't know if you've ever seen this online or not, but if you come to New Orleans on Bourbon Street, it says New Orleans was the capital of the Spanish province of Louisiana from 1762 to 1803. So Spain now is in control of New Orleans from 1762 to 1803, right, during that period of time. Now here a letter comes out. The United States wanted to buy New Orleans back because they knew it was essential for shipping in all the lands up and down coming out of the growing areas of the Mississippi. It was all controlled at the port, and the Spanish had high tariffs on any ship that was coming in and any ship that was going out, except Spain was losing tons and tons of money through counterfeit notes that Spain had. So Thomas Jefferson actually tried to buy the Louisiana Purchase sometime earlier than 1803, but was denied it. All right? That's the background, because it wasn't time yet in God's plan to have it back in our hands. So now, Thomas Jefferson writes this very prophetic letter, and it's almost as if he had prophecy with the way he wrote that God inspired. President Thomas Jefferson wrote this letter, prediction that in April 1802, the letter was to Samuel DuPont amid reports that Spain would retrocede to France the vast territory in Louisiana. So he heard about Spain being in financial debt, can't keep up the land and all the expenses for it. So in 1802, he was trying to buy the Louisiana Purchase, and they wouldn't sell it to him at the time. As the United States expanded westward, navigation of the Mississippi River and its access to the port of New Orleans had become critical to American commerce, so the transfer of the authority was for this cause. So within a week of his letter to DuPont, Jefferson wrote to the U.S. Minister of France, Robert Livingston, and said, "Every eye in the U.S. is now fixed on this affair of Louisiana, the Louisiana Purchase." Now, why is this important? Look what he writes. He says, "Perhaps nothing since the Revolutionary War has produced more uneasy sensations through the body of the nation." So it's almost like the Spirit knew, God's Spirit knew, because you see, what I have here in yellow, the Louisiana Purchase in 1803. He was saying there was nothing since the Revolutionary War. What was the Revolutionary War? 1776. The Louisiana Purchase, 1803. Those two events began and ended the end of Israel's captivity and reestablishment as a nation. So there was things going on in the spirit world that had nothing to do that anybody understood other than God and his plan of what was taking place. And God inspired Thomas Jefferson to write that letter to DuPont about what was taking place. So what was going on at that particular time? Here's the real miracle, how God brought all this to be. So two events that go unnoticed in history that brought this about, both involve Spain. First, the Spanish colony in Louisiana was faltering due to counterfeit, worthless paper money. In other words, they were in debt, and people were counterfeiting their money, and they were going bankrupt. So the king decides they're going to gather up all the money that they had, take a ship out of Spain, send it down to Mexico, and gather up all the money they can gather in the silver reals that they had from those mines, and bring that to New Orleans, buy up all the worthless notes, and secure the colony so they can continue to go on. That's what they intended to do. The second was the Spanish shipwreck, the ship that was bringing all the money to New Orleans that was going on. It was called the El Cazador, meaning the hunter in English, was a Spanish brig that sank in the Gulf of Mexico in 1784. On its way to America for the Spanish, to maintain its possession and keep things going, the ship wrecks. No one knows why. There was no storm. It just disappeared in 1784. The treasure ship lost at sea. This was a headline that I found in a paper. The El Cazador, how a shipwreck changed the American landscape, or America's landscape. The ship, the El Cazador, was about 90 feet long with a shallow draft and had 2 masts. She probably carried 18 high-quality bronze cannons, and the Spanish rig of war set sailed from Veracruz, Mexico, January 11th, 1784. Could have hit a front. Might have had a front coming in. The waters get pretty choppy offshore, but at that particular time, there's no hurricanes and no storms that can actually create this. Loaded down with 17 metric tons of newly minted silver reals, the Spanish currency of the old time. All right, back, here we go. In the 1770s, the Spanish Louisiana Territory's economy was faltering due to the paper money that was not backed by silver or gold. Carlos III, King of Spain, decided to replace the worthless currency with valuable Spanish silver coins. So on October 20, 1783, Charles III of Spain sent the El Cazador on a mission to bring the much-needed hard currency to the Spanish colony of Louisiana to stabilize their currency. The ship sailed from Veracruz, where she was loaded with approximately 450,000 Spanish reals, to be more precise, where she was loaded with Spanish coins, mostly reals pieces of 8. That was tons, just tons and tons of money that they were coming in to stabilize. And when that ship sank, it bankrupted the area, and Spain struggled for the long, long time and couldn't make it work. Going on. It carried 400,000 pesos, another 50,000 pesos of smaller change in various dates. At 1 ounce of the peso, the troy ounces of pound, that's 37,500 pounds of silver. And King Carlos III enlisted the men, his most trusted captain, to command the ship. January 1784, the ship sailed for New Orleans. It was never heard from again. Spain's attempts to locate the ship were unsuccessful. In June 1784, was officially listed as missing at sea. Now, what you have here is a picture of from a trawler off Louisiana. I guess I don't have the picture inside here, but the trawler back in the late 1990s was trawling off the coast of the Mississippi, and he pulled up a net full of silver and gold. It was from that ship. The document where the ship actually was. It was discovered then, that ship. Had that ship made it to the port, New Orleans would have never gone back to the French. It would have never, none of this would have ever happened, and the promises that God had would have never been fulfilled. All right, would have never been fulfilled. By the way, the little trawling boat that found it, the name on the boat is called The Mistake. I said, well, when he pulled up, it was a mistake what he found. But he actually pulled up a trawl net full of money. And that's what he actually found. From that point, I'm running a little long today, but we're about wrapping this up. From that time, we moved into the period after the Battle of New Orleans in 1815, January. It's called the Manifest Destiny of America. It's a phrase that was coined in 1845, expressed the philosophy that drove the 19th century U.S. territorial expansion. Manifest Destiny held that the United States was destined by God and advocates its belief to expand its dominion, to spread democracy and capitalism across the entire North American continent. They believed it was by divine providence that all this took place, and none of it would have happened if it wouldn't have been for that shipwreck that God allowed sinking before it got here. The changes in the wars from the hands from the Spanish back to the French back to America because of a war between the French and the British. And the French needed the money from Napoleon. So there you have it. That's how the miracle of New Orleans was. It was a promise established. It goes all the way back to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob, through the promises that was destined by God to be fulfilled. Well, there you have it. That's our program for today, January 11th. Tomorrow, I'm going to be in Whitwell, Tennessee. We actually got a call this week from a lady who's coming with some friends and some others. Expecting to have an exciting Sabbath, so if you're anywhere in the area, please come out. You can contact Kenneth or Stephanie Britton at 256-663-9534. There's the email address. You can freeze frame the video. You can get the email address and write to them. Services at 11 o'clock Central Time. They're in Central Time. It's 11 o'clock Central Time where they're at. And so January 26th, 2 weeks after that, I will be in Garden City, which is right outside of Savannah, or in the Savannah suburb area. For a church service with them, you can get in touch with Eddie Fountain at 912-728-3254, or you can get in touch with Marcia Key, 912-228-1712. Looking forward to seeing you. Again, if you're anywhere in the area, come on out. We have a great Sabbath and look forward to meeting everyone. Well, that's it. Oh, by the way, their service is at 12 noon. We'll talk more about that next week. Don't forget our Roku channel. We're already getting responses from Roku. People who couldn't find us on the internet, who don't have internet, are now finding us on Roku. So there's our Roku channel. So you can take us anywhere you want to go. You can watch our program for Roku. Next week, I'm going to be going into Mardi Gras. It actually started already, whether you realize it or not. It starts 12 days after Christmas. And it ties in Christmas to Easter. It's called Mardi Gras and 12th Night. We'll talk about that beginning next week. Well, that's it for the program, except as we close our program, we normally have an uplifting video to close with. Today is something very special. I received an email from someone who's actually on our mailing list who contacted the website, and he says, I see that you'd like to close with an uplifting video every week for your program. He says, I've attached a video of his daughter. This is from Samantha Hasselbush. And I listened to the video. It's absolutely phenomenal. But there's another part of the story that I'm going to tell you about right after this video. Watch this uplifting video and be ready to be inspired by the story that I'm about to tell you. You ready? Let's play that video.
If you're feeling helpless, if you're feeling hopeless, you're feeling like you're on your own, well, Jesus knows your troubles, your burdens, fears, and struggles. Remember that you're not alone. He was once as you and I. The Word made flesh, He gave His life. Jesus understands, for He has been there too. He had left His only home and all that He had known to live among us. Jesus understands just what you're going through, for He laid down His rights, laid down His life just to save us. He is always there to hold your hand. Jesus understands. He understands. Storms of life will find you, and doubts and fears may bind you. There's perfect peace and rest in Christ. If you feel rejected, despised and unaccepted, it seems that there's just not a friend inside. Jesus knows just how you feel. He wants you to know His love is real. Jesus understands, for He did it all for you, hanging there upon a tree to set you free from death and from your sinfulness. Jesus understands, and He will walk with you, high priest and friend, Jesus understands, but he has been there too. He had left his only home and all that he had known to live among us. Jesus understands just what you're going through. For he laid down his right, laid down his life just to save us. He is always there to hold your hand. Can't you see he's reaching out his hand? Jesus understands. He understands.
So I listened to the video that you just heard, and I wrote back Mr. Hasselbaum and to thank him for the opportunity to share the video. And this is what he sent me back. So Samantha, his daughter, was born with an eye condition called retinal dysplasia, so she had partial vision until the age of 8, at which time the retina in her left eye, the only eye that had partial vision, detached. Surgery to reattach the retina was not successful, and she has been totally blind now for the last 25 years. And then I just sat back in awe of what I just heard. So here you have a picture of her. She's playing on stage. She's been invited to speak and to play on radio stations and do interviews. That was her first album she actually put out a few years ago. And at the top of the page is her website. She has a website, hasselbushmusic.com. So from all of us, Mr. Hasselbush and Samantha, thank you for sharing that song and that special story to uplift our program today. Thank you very much. Well, that's it for News Nuggets and Insights. Thanks again for watching our program. Till next week, from all of us here at God's Unchanged Your Word, thanks for watching. Have a great week, and don't forget to share this with all your friends. They will love you for it. Or not. Till next week, God be with you.